So if you're applying to law school right now and you're thinking to yourself, my LSAT is strong, so why are my scholarship offers smaller than what people got last year? It's due to the change in the financial engine that used to fund full ride scholarships. That engine is quietly breaking. And so for that reason, full rides are becoming rarer and offers are flatter and more conditional this year. And so if you want the full ride, you've got to negotiate smarter and harder. And for a long time, law schools followed a very predictable pricing strategy. First, they would publish a massive sticker price, like $70,000 a year in tuition, plus fees, plus living expenses. And so the total cost of attendance over the course of 3 years would end up being between $250,000 and $300,000 per year. Of course, in practice, most students didn't actually pay that price. Instead, schools would heavily discount tuition if you had a high LSAT and a high GPA, because high stats raise the school's medians, high medians improve their rankings, the rankings increase their prestige in applications, and the applications are what drives their revenue. And so scholarships functioned like a pricing tool, which raises the question, if schools are giving huge discounts to some students, where does that money come from? And for years, large merit scholarships were indirectly funded by a small group of students who were paying full price, paying sticker. Those were students with lower LSATs, lower GPAs, and weaker expected outcomes, because loans made it possible, specifically the federal lending through the Grad Plus loans. Those students paying full price were the financial engine that kept revenue flowing. They funded scholarships at the top, and they made full rides possible. But that entire system relied on one assumption, that full-price students could always borrow enough to attend. But that assumption has broken because of the elimination of Grad Plus loans. And so now the question is, can you realistically repay those loans when you're going to private funders? For years, the federal Grad Plus loans have historically been broad and eligibility based, but now they're going away after July 2026. That is the change or the transition point where there's a cap on how much you can borrow. And now we're going to private student loans. But if the expected income is modest and the debt is massive, that is a bad loan. And higher rates increase default risk. They don't fix unserviceable debt. And so the lenders are going to stop writing those loans. And of course, you can go to your family and pay full price, but most students can't afford law school when they're paying out of pocket. And so that is going to cause this system to collapse, because the marginal full pay admits won't be able to reliably borrow the full cost of tuition. And if this feels inconsistent or confusing, I totally get you. That is normal. The law schools set the scholarship budgets first, and the yield happens later. And the overspending will become obvious even later than that. And so right now, some schools are still generous, maybe more than they should be, but some schools are tightening immediately in anticipation of the change. And some schools are overspending now, and they're going to tighten really hard later. And so that's why comparing your offers to people on Reddit from last year is misleading, because the game has changed. And because this engine has weakened due to the elimination of the Grad Plus loans, you're going to see fewer full rides, more partial scholarships, more rigid GPA cutoffs, full tuition offers that quietly exclude fees, and more conditional scholarships. You're going to see more pricing models where everybody pays something and no one is getting a true full ride, because law schools have got to protect their revenue. And you can't treat law schools as one cohesive group, because they all have different needs. When you're looking at elite national placement schools, they've got stronger outcomes, they are more insulated from the changes, and they can offer targeted discounts specifically. Secondly, you've got stronger regional schools that need to protect their medians and also protect their revenue, because they are tuition dependent. For them, you're going to see GPA floors, meaning they won't take you if you are below a certain GPA, and you're going to see tighter scholarship offers. Then you have the schools that are entirely tuition dependent, and they're going to be the ones under the highest degree of stress due to the upcoming change. And so they're going to have more conditional scholarships and less aggressive discounting. Now, most applicants imagine a committee debating their personal story, looking at their application essays, connecting with them emotionally, but in reality, the scholarships are driven by LSAT and GPA, yield assumptions, and risk management. And the school's having a GPA cutoff is not personal. It's the school saying, we are not pricing certain awards for this risk bucket this cycle. So you've got to look at scholarships as pricing tools. They're not meant to be rewards for your having worked hard and studied a lot for the LSAT. Your scholarship reflects what the school thinks you will do, whether you will accept their offer of admission at a given price, and what they believe they've got to pay to influence that decision. So your job is to increase your leverage and reduce the perceived risk. And so a high LSAT score still matters, but it may not buy the same discount it used to, meaning you got to have an even higher LSAT score to compensate for all the recent LSAT score inflation. Your leverage, in addition to your numbers, comes from having multiple competing offers that you can play off each other, having a structured negotiation process, and applying broadly enough to create options, especially if you are a splitter. At this point, you probably can't change your GPA, but you can change how many offers of admission that you get. And so I want you to think about 3 different buckets where you're applying to law school. You want to look for, first, schools where you can clearly raise their medians. Those are your safety schools. You want to negotiate aggressively. You want to look at target schools where you're competitive, but not way above their numbers. And you want to look at the sticker risk schools where you want to reduce the downside or you just walk away. And each bucket requires a different tactic. So let's say that you have an offer from school A, tuition is $70,000 per year, but they're giving you quote unquote full tuition. The mandatory fees are $4,000 per year, but it's conditional, and you've got to maintain a 3.0 GPA on a curve. So your tuition is effectively zero, but you've got $12,000 in fees over 3 years, plus you have the risk of losing the scholarship if you fall below the curve. In contrast, School B has tuition of $60,000 per year. They're offering you a scholarship of $35,000 a year. That is totally guaranteed for 3 years, not conditional, and the fees are only $1,500 per year. So your net tuition is $25,000 a year times 3, $75,000 total. The fees are $4,500 per year in total, $4,500 in total. So total cost is roughly $80,000 with no risk. School A looks like a full ride. School B has a higher cost, but School A has a lot of downside risk. School B is predictable. You know what you're getting into. So School B might actually be a better offer because conditionals offers, of course, are not guaranteed. So you want to read the fine print. Before you pop the champagne and throw the confetti and celebrate any offer, you want to look for the conditions for the scholarship, if any. You want to look at the fees aside from tuition. You want to look at whether they're going to renew the scholarship or not after 1L. And you want to look at whether the deposits are non-refundable. Now, let's talk negotiation. Bad negotiation is emotional. Good negotiation is mathematical. So bad negotiation is saying, I just really want to attend, but I can't afford it. Maybe I'll just pay it anyway. Good negotiation is, I'm choosing between you and this other school. If you can improve the total cost by Y, I can commit by Z. So you're giving them choices. You're letting them know your best alternatives to accepting their offer. You also want to translate the offer into total 3-year cost, submit a structured request for reconsideration, and make a specific ask. Meaning you want more scholarship money, you want a reduction in fees, you want better terms, you want them to eliminate the conditionality, and you reapproach them with any new offers you get or any deadlines you've got to adhere to. You also can ask for non-tuition levers besides just the sticker price, like them covering fees, giving you stipends, guaranteeing the renewal of the scholarship, funding your bar prep, and removing any conditions. And you want to be willing to walk away if the numbers don't work. So when you write them an email, you could say, subject line, scholarship reconsideration with your name and your LSAC ID number. You say to them, thanks for the offer. Your school remains one of my top choices. but I'm currently deciding between your school and peer school, which has offered X thousand per year, bringing my total 3-year cost to approximately 3x. If your school could increase my award by X per year or cover mandatory fees, I would be prepared to accept that offer by X date. Then you just stop and you see what happens. And you go back and forth. I recommend keeping it over email so that you can structure exactly what you want to say. They are much more experienced with these negotiations than you are because they do this every day with thousands of applicants. Now remember that scholarships only matter relative to outcomes. A larger scholarship at a school with a weak placement could be a worse deal than a smaller scholarship at a school with strong outcomes. Taking on debt without likelihood of a good outcome is the real risk. So you always want to evaluate the offers based on expected outcomes for the median student, not just random anecdotes from Reddit. Now consider that some scholarship tightening is actually consumer protection. The old system sold terrible deals to uninformed applicants. And fewer catastrophic outcomes is a good thing, but it requires smarter strategy at the top. And so if I were applying this cycle, I would apply to more schools than feels comfortable. I would treat the first offer as just a starting point and negotiate for stability and better offers, better terms, more scholarships, full rides over prestige of the school. I would focus on the outcomes. I would not get emotionally attached to any particular school. So think about whether you want to anchor on the biggest discount or the best debt to income ratio. That's how you win even when the scholarship game changes.